Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Well, we survived the weekend, and today we've got a little bit of a crowd, but a great one. Welcome to Monday Mailbag. This is your show. I'm joined by Zoe Abelson and Alaina Lackman of the Goffberg Jewelers sales team. Production note, guys. Both Alaina and Zoe are going to be hosting their own show, Watch Girls A to Z, every Thursday. We're trying to fill the Tuesday and Thursday slots to bring you even more great content and new perspectives. So look for them this Thursday, Watch Girls A to Z. All right, guys, let's do some wrist shots. All right, now, let's go with Zoe first, because JLC favoritism, naturally.
Yep, so Tim and I are both JLC fans. This is a Reverso Night and Day that I acquired in Berlin on a work trip. And so for that reason, on the other dial, it's always set to European time. So it has a special sentimental value. It reminds me of travel, so always makes me happy when I look at my wrist.
I'm wearing a PAM 512, which has always been one of my favorite Panerais. Having a little wrist, it's often hard to find a Panerai that fits the wrist properly. This is a 42mm released in 2013. It's a pretty cool model. It's a remake of a transitional piece that came out in the 1940s, I believe. And it combines the radio mirror case with Luminor lugs, which is pretty cool. It's kind of sporty, versatile. Has an awesome power reserve, really ultra thin movement. It's a nice piece.
And I'm sorry, we've got a preponderance of JLC content tonight. I've got the Reverso that doesn't tell time, the Platinum No. 2 Tourbillon. Lovely little watch that fits my petite wrist. All right, so guys, remember, if you don't have the time to watch our full-length broadcasts, remember my other channel, Watch You Want Watch Reviews, for the old-style 5 to 7 minute quick hits. It is the hardware store, open 7/24, so subscribe to that channel. And remember, the best way to get those videos is with our Goffberg Watchbox app. It has a content stream featuring my videos, my writing, the watch magazines and blogs that you love, plus a real-time value tracker for one watch or all the watches in your collection. You can track the value of your collection as we pull data from the entirety of the internet with our pricing AI. You can even track the value of watches you don't yet own, so you know the moment to strike to get the best possible price. That's the Goffberg Watchbox app. You can find it on goffbergwatches.com, header bar app, iOS and Android. All right, guys, let's play this or that. Okay, so now, you guys are new to the format, so I'll let you know how this or that works. You have to pick the watch that you actually want. If one's more expensive, you can't say, well, I'll take that, sell it, and buy the other one. It's got to be a watch you buy to wear. So, all cards on the table, guys. You have a choice between the Vacheron Constantin Historiques American 1921, which is the reference 82035 in rose gold. That's $34,300, or the Patek Philippe Gondolo 5124J. This one is $23,700. So would you prefer the Vacheron or the Patek? Neither one's round. Neither one is based on contemporary case forms. Each one's evocative of Art Deco. Which way do you choose?
Well, it's really interesting that you picked those two watches because we're actually wearing watches that kind of emulate the same shape, and I think we'll probably have very different answers. Alaina and I tend to have different opinions on watch styles, so I would definitely go for Patek. I think it's beautiful, it's Art Deco, has a similar shape to the Reverso that I'm wearing right now, and Pateks are classic. I think the market right now for gondolas are a little soft, but they'll come back.
And as Zoe said, we usually pick the complete opposite. I would have to go with the Vacheron on this one. Every time I see that watch, it reminds me of a Dali painting. It's just a little bit distorted, a little bit off, but it still serves a purpose, which I think is pretty cool. Both have that deco feel, but I don't know, there's something about that Vacheron. I just find it more interesting.
I don't want to act the tiebreaker, but you guys know I'm always a little bit unconventional, so I'm going to pick the watch that I didn't offer, because my show. I'm going to go with the American, and I'm going to go with it in a white metal. I like the 5N red gold, but I think I'm going to go for it in white gold, because I'm just that way. Okay, interesting. So I think overall what you can see is they have fantastic taste in watches in both cases. And since we have such fine tastes in evidence, why don't we learn a little bit more about our guests tonight? We know they know watches, but why don't you tell us your stories with Govberg? Zoe, why don't you start?
So I joined the Govberg team about 8 months ago, and I'm a senior watch buyer and sales associate. Most of my day consists of speaking to clients and valuing their timepieces and hopefully taking them in to sell for pre-owned inventory. Also includes selling new for all of our brands that we're authorized dealers for. My past experience is in the auction industry, so I tend to know a little bit more about the vintage market, and but I'm learning a lot about the modern market working for Govberg Jewelers. It's been a really, really great experience working for Govberg.
Grail watch. On the spot.
Oh man, it changes every day. I would say I would love, it's not so much a Grail watch to everyone else, but for me a Patek 96 would be a dream watch. Probably in steel, probably with Breguet numerals, something a little special, still classic, but it's the first Calatrava that Patek ever produced, and it happens to fit my wrist very well. But again, it changes every day. I would probably want a Stella dial day date with a blue, like a powder blue diamond dial and white golds. It always changes.
Very cool. All right. Alaina, so you've been with Govberg a little bit longer. Why don't you tell us your story and kind of...
Sure. Thanks, Tim. I've been with Govberg for about 7 years at this point. I've spent almost my entire time at Govberg working in our concierge department. So working, you know, the phones, working internet, working email, dealing with some pretty amazing clients. Hey, Gary, I know you're watching tonight. I also run our digital platforms, so our eBay business, our Chrono24, the forums. I'm sure there's a lot of forum guys out there. Hey to you as well. Yeah, just buying, selling, trading, pre-owned watches, new watches, a little bit of everything.
Okay, very cool stuff. Grail watch?
AP Perpetual, ceramic. Yeah.
Okay, Royal Oak Perpetual ceramic, going straight for the top shelf.
Yep.
Good stuff. Okay, so tonight's questions, guys, this is Mailbag, and we've got more expertise than ever on the set tonight, so I want to definitely alternate between questions you forwarded and live questions from our chat box. And remember, CQ the Watch Guy, longtime friend of the house, is answering your questions live in the chat box. If I can't, he can. Trust me, this guy knows his stuff. Okay, so Don R. asks, I hear a lot about Sellita movements, that they're just clones of ETA calibers, wondering if there is any difference between the two, and if not, are there patents protecting the ETA designs? Well, let's answer the second part first, because it's the easiest. No, there are no specific patents protecting the ETA designs. Even specific refinements to the movement, like Etachron, a regulation system, have been around so long that they're just considered to be general watch knowledge. So you can build a copy of an ETA 2824, 2892, Valjoux 7750, and if you're able to build it cheap enough and well enough, you can sell it with no copyright infringement or infringement of IP. Now here's the thing. Are the Sellita movements just clones of the ETAs? Pretty close. Now the SW200, SW300, and SW500, respectively, are clones of the ETA 2824, 2892, and Valjoux 7750. There are a few changes, most of which relate to the actual assembly of the movements, just little features that change so they're easier to assemble. There's a difference of a jewel here, maybe a hairspring design there, perhaps something's finished a little different or a regulator's been altered, but substantially these are drop-in, millimeter for millimeter, lean for lean replacements for the ETAs. Now, there are some complications here because there are several grades of ETA and there are several grades of Sellita. So you can go from the entry level to a chronometer grade movement from either company. And that's why you can't align perfectly, because you don't know what grade you're talking about in all cases, even if the reference number is the same. Finally, I think it's also important to note that there is another movement that's a drop. There are a couple of movements that are drop-in for ETAs, but the one you see most often is the Soprod A10. That's actually descended from a Seiko 4L. Although it drops in and replaces a 2892, it comes from a completely different engineering lineage. So definitely, that's how it is. You're either a drop-in for an ETA, or you're an exact line-for-line, millimeter-for-millimeter copy of an ETA. Okay, so here's an interesting question from Christopher H., and I'm going to throw this to you guys because you actually buy and trade more watches than I ever will. But he asks, would you mind discussing the importance of box and papers to the value, resale, and collectability of a watch? For which watches would a complete set be most important?
That's a great question. Obviously, the box and papers are hugely important for buying and selling watches. There's definitely some brands that are more important than others. Generally, I feel like the watches that get knocked off the most, it's most important to have the box and papers. Also, Zoe, you can probably speak more to this, but from a vintage level, people want to know where the watch came from, who the original owner was. Definitely important to have them. There are some pieces I think it's less important. You know, more contemporary models that came out, it seems to be less important, but as those start to age, it will be more valuable to have them.
I totally agree. I think being a watch buyer for Govberg Jewelers, we tend to see a lot of pre-owned watches that don't originally come with don't come with the original box and papers, and that does hurt the value a little bit. Pre-owned watches that come complete always tend to have a little bit more value. Vintage, it could change the price astronomically. I mean, it's so difficult to find watches that were produced in the 50s, 60s, 70s that have the original papers and weren't thrown out, or if someone moved, given away along the way. So box and papers are very important. I personally would always keep them. If you either buy new or buy pre-owned and have the box and papers, it's definitely worth saving, and even if it takes up a little bit of space, I would say keep it.
And that's great insight on box and papers and the importance of a complete set. Collectors are becoming more and more sophisticated, and especially on the pre-owned side, the pre-owned buyer is no longer the guy who just wants a bargain. Increasingly, he's a guy who wants to have a watch that will hold its value and, you know, stand shoulder to shoulder with the watches he bought new. So I can see a growth in the interest of the complete sets, and that's why these days we've even seen counterfeit boxes and papers. That's a thing now.
That is a thing.
We do see them come in. The other thing, just in case you are buying a watch that doesn't have box and papers, there are a lot of brands that will register the watch and give you paperwork. For example, Patek does an extract from the archives, which is pretty interesting. It usually provides the year of manufacture, it has serial information, and it actually gets registered under your name, I believe. So if you do happen to buy a watch that doesn't have box and papers, which, you know, sometimes happens, some things are rare out there and you're not going to find it with, reach out to the brands and see if they're able to provide that for you, because a lot of brands will.
It's worth it.
And if you can't, remember, there's always the extract from the archives, which is kind of your backup certificate of origin. So guys joining us in the chat tonight, I see Josh Thanos is here, CQ the Watch Guy joining us. I see Juan Huertas is joining us. I can see we've got a friend, Komatsu, joining us from Moscow, David Hefkin. We have Thumper JDM joining us, Eddie Landsberg, a longtime follower of the channel. Guys, welcome and thanks for joining us. I do want to mention, just to expound on Christopher H's question and the great answer that Zoe and Alaina provided us, I think it's most important to get box and papers when you're talking about a very common make and model of watch, because for instance, something like a Rolex 116610, there's a million of them out there, and that's normally like an exaggeration to say, oh, there's a million of something. There's more than a million of them out there. So how do you set your watch apart, the one that you're buying or selling, from all the other identical watches out there that are 2 to 3 years old? Well, a full set really helps. The box, the papers, especially with Rolex's relatively new 5-year warranty, having all the documentation can make a big difference in a very crowded field of contemporary watches that are massively produced. The other thing is, when a watch is easily and commonly counterfeited, it's important to have those corroborating documents, especially with something like a Panerai where you'll have a movement sticker, a certificate of origin, there will be a second movement sticker on the box. The more secondary documents you can get that back up the serial numbers on the watch, generally the better. And it's always important to remember that these documents are now so valuable in their own right. We have seen counterfeit boxes and papers. So do your homework. Again, for something like a Panerai, PAM 111, you know, a Breitling Super Avenger, these are watches that are in the crosshairs of counterfeiters because they're relatively simple, relatively common, and it's easy to reproduce the look without reproducing exactly the same fit and finish. So boxes and papers help. And then finally, like Zoe said, when the watch is just so valuable that you're dealing with an inordinately huge amount of money and you have to make sure everything lines up, that's where, like on a Patek Philippe 5020, you're going to want to see the certificate of origin. A Patek without the certificate of origin is like an orphan in the eyes of collectors.
You want to make sure that dial matches that serial and that reference, and it's very important.
Yeah, with Patek, you can get an extract from the archives. You cannot reacquire the certificate of origin. Okay, so now guys, we also have some interesting questions coming through in the chat box. Let me see. Oh, here's a great suggestion. I think Tim should go blonde too. You mean I'm not?
I think that is a good suggestion.
I mean,
I think we're pretty similar.
I can't compete with that.
Yeah, that's tough.
We could frost it next episode.
Fair enough. So, okay, here's a question from Josh for Alaina and Zoe. What's the first watch you ever bought? I'm not sure. Is this the first watch they ever bought for themselves or the first watch they ever bought as traders? You can answer either one.
That's a good question.
Wow, I can't remember the first watch I ever bought as a trader. The first watch I ever bought was a Rolex Datejust. Yep. Okay. Actually, my parents technically bought it for me when I graduated from college, but I picked it out.
Funny enough, mine was also a Rolex Datejust, my own personal watch that I bought. It was actually also gifted to me, but it was my first real timepiece. And it's funny because Alaina and I sit across from each other every day. We talk a lot. We have a lot of watch talk throughout the day. And there was one day where we noticed I was wearing a Rolex Datejust with a fluted bezel and a Jubilee bracelet and Roman numeral dials, and you were wearing...
I'm a smooth bezel, oyster bracelet type of gal. We're just a little different in our tastes, but yeah.
And I'll throw this out. The first watch that I can remember buying with my own money was a 1974 caliber 214 Accutron Spaceview, and I still have it.
Awesome.
So we got a question coming in from Mason Manning for both of you, and the question is, on average, could you estimate what percentage hit a pre-owned watch takes if you don't have the box and papers?
I think the watch is going to take a hit regardless if it has box and papers. Typically, the way that we value box and papers, it typically gives about $500 extra in resale value. So I can't give an exact answer on the percentage. It's very dependent on the brand, it's very dependent on the model, but if it's the same exact watch in the same condition, one has box and papers, one has nothing, we're going to give around, sometimes more, sometimes a little less, $500 extra to the one that does have box and papers.
Yeah, I agree with Zoe. It's a really hard question to answer on a blanket level. It's very dependent on the watch. I would agree about $500, give or take, depending on the model, but obviously a high-end collectible Patek, it's going to be worth a lot more than, say, you know, a tag or something. But it's always important, and you're always going to lose a little bit by not having that.
Yeah, I think there are times when it's particularly sensitive, but for a company that sells a lot of Omega, Rolex, sells a lot of Breitling, sells a lot of Panerai and IWC and steel or titanium, you're looking at about $500. Now, as the watch becomes proportionally more expensive, the $100,000 watch without box and papers is going to take more than a $500 hit. We're talking about our wheelhouse watches, and a good rule of thumb is $500.
Yeah.
So a question from Thumper JDM. Tim, watches are getting bigger. Do your guests prefer women's watches, or do they opt for unisex size men's watches?
That's a great question. We've actually had a lot of discussions about this in the last few weeks. It's interesting you say watches are getting bigger. As somebody that's been in the industry for a little while now, not that long, I actually feel like they're coming down in size. Women are wearing larger and larger watches, though. For me, I'm comfortable in about a 40, although I am wearing a 42 tonight. But generally, I prefer a man's oversized watch to a woman's watch. Just aesthetically, they generally fit my style a little bit better.
100% agreed. I think on average I usually wear about 36mm watch, but I would go up to a 40 probably. Anything larger would look a little crazy on my wrist. But I really just don't, if I have a men's watch and a ladies' watch, it's usually men's. But there are certain ladies' pieces like this Bulgari Serpenti or certain tanks from Cartier that I gravitate to, but in general I would say men's watches.
So in general, I think the woman's watch as a class is almost like what Toyota did with Scion. They said, look, kids, we designed this just for you. And what do the kids say? Yeah, give me a Forerunner. Forget that. I think the idea is that the men's watch is probably designed with, I don't want to say more integrity, but women don't like being pandered to, and I think that's part of the appeal of guys' watches. It's not like a pander. It's not like, this watch is for you.
Yeah, and I'm also not a girly girl, so a lot of the brands will put a lot of diamonds or a pink strap, and it's just not my style.
Not to mention the quartz aspect of it. I think a lot of these brands think that women want quartz because we wear watches, like we wear jewelry, we take them off, we swap them out. You know, there's actually a lot of guys that have 10, 15 watches in their collection, and they're doing the same thing. They're rotating watches through the week, through the month, through the year. So to think that women want quartz watches, I don't think is entirely true. I would rather wear a mechanical watch, obviously. Maybe not every woman wants a mechanical watch, but there are a lot of people out there that would value the movement in there.
Interesting. Okay, so it's unanimous. Men's watches. Yeah. So, guys,
we agreed on that one.
Yeah.
Thanks for keeping the questions flowing. I see David Coates joining us. I see Rum is joining us from St. Petersburg, Russia. Thank you for staying up to watch us. I see that Andre's here. I see that JCWB is here. Helicopter Pad could be one of my old friends from the Navy, from Naval Aviation. And Dennis McFeely is joining us. Cam M. Eric Nielsen, good old friends of the channel, welcome. So we had another question that came through over the wires, and this was this was a question about most interesting watches that I'd encountered recently, and I changed it into a question for our guests. But Zoe, Alaina, what are the most interesting watches you've encountered recently, either bought, sold, wore, or otherwise come into contact with? Alaina, what did you see first?
Sure. So you become a little jaded in what we do. There's a lot of watches that come in and out of the doors. And as somebody that loves watches, there's things I get excited with, but not on an everyday basis. I did see a Hublot Big Bang Unico, the Sapphire version, the Chrono, a couple weeks ago. Was sitting on someone's desk, and I was taken aback by how awesome that watch is. Obviously, Hublot is innovative. The material's innovative. It's just a really cool watch. Again, it kind of took me aback. It has a clear strap, which I know there are other brands that do the Sapphire case. Bell & Ross does one. I believe Richard Mille does one. But that strap sort of set it apart. And again, it was a pretty awesome piece if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, transparent sapphire case, very cool. Also very cool limited edition. And they have new ones in Furious Fuchsia and Cobalt. I saw this sapphire case Hublot last year at Baselworld. And I'm not an Hublot guy, I'm not an Hublot collector, I'm not of the Hublot sensibility. I thought, you know, that's pretty cool. So it does kind of have a transcendent appeal about it. Zoe, how about you? What was the most interesting watch you encountered recently?
So I just recently one amazing watch that came into my hands was a yellow gold GMT-MAster 2 from the early 90s. It has a gold Serti dial, so it has rubies and diamonds, and you just don't see that often. It's a pretty rare piece. The bezel is all black, it's all yellow gold, and it just stands out from all the other different combinations of GMT-MAster. I fell in love with it instantly.
Yeah, I mean, as pilots' watches go, maybe that's a little bit rich for, you know, your Pan Am, TWA,
Definitely.
Delta United, but it's fly like a G6. I'm horrible, guys. I'm here all night. All right, so here's a question that came in, and a gentleman asked, I would be interested in your views on the JLC Master 8-Day Perpetual versus the JLC Master Ultra Thin Perpetual. The Master Ultra Thin Perpetual, guys, you know it as the Dr. Strange watch, and I get a question about this almost every week. But JLC does make other perpetual calendars, and the Master 8-Day is a compelling one. Now, this gentleman is saying that he's trying to choose between the two as a midterm goal. He's already got a Christopher Ward GMT and a Nomos Zurich Weltzeit Nachtblau, which I absolutely love, but he's looking to move into the mid-tier of luxury, something above the entry level, and he wants to get a perpetual calendar, which is kind of a big jump. I'm not sure this is mid-tier, but the pricing is relatively tight between these two. Before 2016, I would have said go with the Master 8 Days Perpetual. To me, It's just a more deluxe, upscale, finely finished, and technically interesting watch. At 39 millimeters, the case is the same size, although at 12.8, it's thicker than the 9.2 millimeters of the ultra thin. It has an 8-day power reserve, so it's a great option if you have a collection and you like to rotate. You won't have to constantly rewind this very complicated and involved display. The other thing, though, is that I would have said take it over the Master Ultra Thin Perpetual silver dial, and then in 2016 they come out with the Master Ultra Thin, wait for it, Perpetual black dial. That's the one I'd go with, guys. The price is close, great value for the 8 days at $21,500, but at $19,000 for the Ultra Thin with the black dial and steel, I feel like you're getting a watch with just like a mailed fist worth of visual punch. This is a watch that just takes your breath away. The pricing is right, the look is great, the thickness is perfect, and it has the convenience of automatic winding. I would go for that, but do you guys have a strong preference? I mean, you've seen both watches, you've sold both watches.
I'm with you on the black dial.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, the Master Ultra Thin is gorgeous. Anyone could wear this watch, and it would look good on a smaller wrist, but also a huge wrist because it's got that much presence and gravitas. The 8 days, nice movement, interesting concept, but not as visceral or emotionally appealing. I think that's always a challenge for guys. Do you go with more complication, or do you go with the watch that's more emotionally appealing?
I tend to gravitate towards simple.
Okay.
So, although obviously complications are more impressive, I dress very simply, so to have a crazy complicated watch on my wrist, it would just stick out. So I go for classic, simple.
I'm mixed. I'm not sure which direction I would go. Like Zoe, I generally like simple watches. However, I don't find myself getting hugely emotionally connected to watches. I think it may have to do with the fact that I don't do a lot in the vintage world. Definitely Zoe's thing, not so much mine. So less emotionally connected, probably simple as well.
Yeah, I think we're unanimous. The black dial is just, I mean,
wow,
what a watch.
Gorgeous.
Probably the best complication JLC has released since the 2000s. That's the one to go with, man. If you got the choice, go with that and then pocket the extra money. You won't regret it. And then you'll have money for a service. Okay, so I should mention that both of you guys are setting up Instagram accounts. Now, Zoe, you are well known on Instagram. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll segue into the Instagram accounts that we're creating.
So I had a personal account. It's just my first and last name. It was for travel and food that I eat. And then I started, as I got into the watch industry, I started at Antiquorum as an admin, and would ship all the watches, and I started coming across all these amazing watches and taking pictures of it. And I realized that my friends and family probably don't want their Instagram feed inundated with just wrist shots. So I started an Instagram account specifically for wrist shots and travel. It's Watch Girl Off Duty. So you get kind of my outside life outside of work, which you'll see tends to still have a lot of watches involved, and then at work as well. And yeah, it's really fun. The Instagram worlds for the watch industry is crazy, and I've met a lot of really interesting people through it.
And the nice thing is we're trying to set up Instagram with watches that is not built around posturing and BS and photos of Courvoisier in a nightclub in Las Vegas next to a Ferrari with a Richard Mille and like 5 models. Like, we're going to show you the actual watches that we see on a day-to-day basis here, but also some of the best pieces that clients bring in. Some of them won't even be for sale, but trust me, working here you see every watch ever made. And if you follow us on Instagram, you get to come along for the ride. So Alaina, I know you're going to be working kind of the trading floor, so you'll have both the new and the pre-owned.
Yeah, so I actually have had an Instagram going for a little while. What I like to do on my Instagram is feature watches that we have for sale. As everybody's mentioned, we see tons of watches come in every day. Some are rare, some are things that are, you know, part of your core collection, the Submariners of the world. So I like to post up what we have coming in before it actually gets live, and that way people that follow have, you know, the first shot at buying and trading towards cool watches that are coming in. So we're going to be building those in the next couple months, weeks, years, so definitely follow, check them out.
So we got some great questions coming in from the chat box, and I have to say, Heels Just is asking, Tim, what would be your suggestion for a dress watch on the more formal side, under $15,000 that isn't one of the usual suspects? Okay, it's not one of the usual suspects, and a diver to survive the Houston storm we have going on here. I would say a great suggestion, if you're willing to deal with a more traditionally proportioned watch, but epically beautiful, would be an early Longa Saxonia from the 90s. You can't miss. Finish, wrist presence, brand pedigree, and you can get them well under $15,000. And a diver, he's also asking for a diver to survive the epic Houston storm we're having here. All the best, man. Hang in there. I would say, honestly, my favorite diver from off the beaten path is the Karl F. Bucherer Petravi Scuba Tech. You get a lot of watch for your money. A great watch, a great bracelet, a great clasp. In the hand, it feels as substantial as a Rolex, and I can't say that of many watches out there. What do you guys think? Sub $15,000 dress watch and a diver, but not from the usual suspects. You can go like Zenith if you want. If you want, you can say IWC Portofino. Anything's fair game.
I have a newfound love for glass chutes. Not a usual suspect, but still high up in recognition for like well-made, well, German watches, not Swiss watches. But yeah, I think they're beautifully designed. I think they're well-made watches, and you can get them for below 15.
Yeah, something like the Senator 60s.
Absolutely.
Really nice collection.
Yeah, and I know you said off the beaten path, but for some reason my mind just keeps going back to JLC. Obviously, a huge amount of watches that you could buy, some simple, some complicated, but for some reason my mind keeps going there when you say dress watch.
I'll be honest with you, if you can deal with 34 millimeters, the best watch I ever bought for the money was my 34 millimeter Master Ultra Thin, a movement like you will not see in the sub $10,000 price range, and it's the same Bausch developed for Audemars and Vacheron during the 1950s. Display case back, 6 millimeters thick, epically beautiful, wears well with anything but a bathing suit. And remember this, it's true, I've worn it with everything but a bathing suit. You could probably swing that Master Ultra Thin Perpetual pre-owned for $15,000. Something to think about. All right, so, oh boy, the JLC drinking game. If you guys aren't familiar with this, there's a JLC drinking game going. I'm sorry, I probably just lost the factory's endorsement forever and all time. But apparently every time I mention JLC during these broadcasts, people are taking shots. Guys, I hope it's spring water, because you're going to be gone.
I think we should join that. I think we should do that with our audience and see how it goes.
You know what? I have a bottle of Knob Creek somewhere around here. Next time. Next time. The holidays are coming, guys. All right. So let me just double check right here. But Bob F. asks, hi Tim, it seems like the price of a Swiss tourbillon watch is falling, with Ulysse Nardin asking $28,000 for theirs, and Tag Heuer launching a $15,000 tourbillon. On the face of it, let me just explain. It does look like the price is falling. People are wondering, these used to be $100,000 watches, and now you're seeing watches for a quarter or a sixth of that price, and you're wondering, what gives? What has changed? Is this the same kind of watch at a lower price, or has something been cut out of the equation? And that's where I kind of want to bring my watch in as a demonstrator. I'm hauling my Reverso Platinum #2 up onto the table to demonstrate. There's no secret here, guys. Ulysse Nardin has managed to take in-house a lot of material, from movement construction to silicon technology to grand faux enameling and case manufacture, so they could get their price down to $28,000. But make no mistake, the movement of both watches, the UN and the Tag Heuer, has excellent mechanical finish, but not the kind of artisanal, you know, blood, sweat, and tears finish that you see on a Patek Philippe tourbillon, that you see on this Platinum #2, that you'll see on something from Audemars Piguet like a Royal Oak tourbillon. these are all watches that are finished by hand, and you pay not so much for the escapement that spins. That's easy to do, and you can get it for under $1,000 in a Chinese watch. It's the degree of regulation to make it actually keep good time, and the finishing to make it beautiful and exclusive. And because of the human effort that goes into a watch like this, it can never cost $15,000. What you're getting from TAG is a very impressively made watch that's mostly machine built, but gives you a lot of value for your money. That's the distinction between a $100,000 tourbillon and a mostly machine built, though human assembled, $15,000 tourbillon. Zoe, have we seen any of these yet? Have we seen any of the tags come through?
Not yet. I think
I sold a pre-owned a couple of months ago.
And do you mind if I ask what it sold for pre-owned or roughly?
You know what, I actually don't remember off the top of my head. It came in from a big collector we had who bought it from the boutique, and then we sold it pre-owned. I don't actually remember, I'd have to take a look.
It's probably fair to say pre-owned Tag Heuer sells for like 65 cents on the dollar, 60 to 65 cents. So you take your $15,000 watch, sells about 60 cents, 65 cents on the dollar second time around. Again, that sounds bad until you realize that the $100,000 artisanally finished tourbillon that I've gushed over, this watch was $126,000 in 2003 and I paid $30 for it in 2015. The Tag Heuer actually held its value percentage-wise a lot better than the artisanally finished tourbillon. A lot better. But that's how I'm able to own one, so I'm not complaining. Okay. Good stuff, guys. I do want to mention, for those of you just joining us, the best way to follow my wrist videos and my articles, get your curated stream of content, and keep track of your collection in live time with values updated daily, is to download our Govberg Watchbox app on our govbergwatches.com website. I also want to remind you that it's not a one-man show anymore. We're adding new people to the channel tomorrow, Top Shelf with Claudio, and Watches Live, a first ever live tell-all, talk-all, sell-all special with both Danny and Brian Govberg. We're going to be giving away good swag every 15 minutes for 2 hours starting at 6:30 Eastern tomorrow. So tune in for Watches Live with both of the Govbergs and lots of free stuff, plus some cool watches at exclusive prices. Zoe, Alaina, you're going to be doing the Watch Girls A to Z every other Thursday. Tell us briefly what that show is going to be about.
Sure, we're still deciding what to talk about. I think it's pretty unique that you're going to have two women up there and willing to talk about watches. So if you guys have topics in mind, things you want us to talk about, you want a woman's perspective on stuff, definitely shoot us a message, give us a call, let us know. We're open to suggestions. We have some cool ideas in the back of our minds, but I'm definitely willing to take some ideas from the people watching.
And it's important to remember, you can always join them in the live chat box with your questions in real time combined with their answers. Two heads are better than one. Watch Girls A to Z coming this Thursday. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We had fantastic participation. We got a comment from Dennis McFeely. Zoe and Alaina are very natural on the show. Impressive first showing. I expected nothing less. These are aces right here. Guys, I'm Tim, she's Zoe, she's Alaina. They're the three amigos plus one. This is Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on.